Hello everyone, this is Andrew Price from BlenderGuru.com. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a tree in Blender. Now this is the finished result here. It's a basic mesh which has hundreds of planes parented to the twig areas which act as the leaves. This is all made possible due to the curve to tree script which was implemented into Blender after the Big Buck Bunny project. So just to give you an idea of how it's made, we're going to start by using a bezier curve and just create basic shapes of branches, which is fairly simple, and then we're going to be adding these ugly box shaped areas which are going to act as the bounding meshes for where our twigs are going to be generated, and that's what gives us this result here. I decided to throw mine into a scene with an old man. It's part of a project I did called Remembering the Past. But yeah, you can do what you like with yours. Get creative. Alright, let's get started. Start by opening up a new scene. Okay, first things first though, before we get started on the actual tutorial aspect, something I want to just talk about is when it comes to trees, you really need to find a reference image and just base off that, because you can't really just sort of wing it just by memory, because it just doesn't really work out right, just talking from experience. So what I'd recommend is go to flickr.com, do a search for trees, and then just have a look at the possibilities you have there. These are some of the ones that I pulled up. As you can see, every tree species is really different, and unless you're a highly qualified, I don't know, horticulturalist, you're not really gonna have the knowledge of what's behind a tree. So what I did is just picked a reference image and then just traced it. So yeah, as you can see, every trunk, the angle that the branches come out, the way the leaves droop, it's important that you really get that right. So yeah, just find an image, tree that you like, and then just trace it basically. So for this particular tutorial, I'm going to be using this image here, which I found off Flickr, and you can find a link for that on my tutorial as well. Okay, so let's get started. Let's add that image into the background, like so. Okay, now we're going to be using Bezier curve as I stated earlier. So let's just add that, and then make it vertical like so. Okay, now first things first is we need to change the settings on this curve before we get started. So in the editing panel, just turn off back and front, because that'll give us some weird results if we leave them on. And we're just going to turn on 3D, and that'll allow us to move this along all axes like so. And we're just going to make the bevel depth, turn that up to 1, and the bevel resolution to 6, and that will just create a tube which we can which is basically going to be the trunk. Okay, now moving on to making the tree. Okay, so what we're going to be doing, I'm not sure if you're familiar with curves. I'm hoping you are before you get started on this tutorial, but basically we're just going to be control clicking. So we're going to select the endpoint and we're just going to control click, and that's how you're going to be creating the base of the tree. That's just it's like tracing, really. It's pretty simple. Okay, in regards to thickness, when a tree starts at the ground, obviously it's a lot thicker and gets thinner as it gets towards the top. So to create this effect in Blender, you select a handle and you press Alt S, and that allows you to shrink or fatten the width of that particular handle. So I'm going to make this bottom one fairly fat because it's the trunk, obviously, and the top one I'm going to make it fairly thin. And you only need to adjust the starting and the end points, because what we're going to do now is going to select all the points, hit W, and then select smooth radius. And what that does is just create like a gradient effect basically, and it's just changed all these other handles according to what the start and end points are. Okay, so that's the basic shape of the trunk there. Again, you might want to go into a little bit more detail for yours. Okay, but I'm just going to move on to the branches now. So to create a branch, it's the same as the trunk basically. I'm just going to select these 4 handles here. Going to hit Shift D to duplicate it, and I'm just going to pull it off to the side here. Okay, now when it comes to connecting these, that is all handled by the script basically. So to connect a branch to a trunk, you just need to position it close not inside the trunk. You don't want them to be touching too much because the script can sort of malfunction a bit and not really know what's going on, and it can produce some rather strange results if you put them too close together. Okay, so what I'm doing here is to just create more points, selecting 2 points and just hitting W and then subdivide. I'm just tracing like I did with the trunk, but obviously just going into a little bit more detail because the branches are a lot more wavy and harder to model, so you want to spend a fair bit of time here. Now, when it comes to the tree, if you leave too much up to the script, you can get some strange results. So you really want to spend some time just on the hand modeling. Just spend as much time as you can, because that's really what where it comes down to. There's no sort of magic bullet to just hit a button and create a fantastic tree. You really need to spend some time just studying the contours of the tree and getting it right before you can just use the script. Okay, so again, I'm selecting all those points and hitting smooth radius. Okay, now you can go to as much detail as you like with your tree on the number of branches you use. I find that the more you model, the better off your tree ends up looking, because the script creates some, it does a pretty good job with the twigs, but it's not going to just throw in branches as well, and branches are the extremely important part of the tree to create it, make it look realistic. So you want to put in as many as you can. I'm not going to bore you all by creating a 3-hour video of me just moving handles, so I'm going to leave it here for now, and I'm going to show you the finished of what it looks like when I've finished doing the curves, and we're just going to jump to it from there. Okay, so this is what the finished tree curve looks like. As you can see, it's basically just what I did before. I've created a few smaller branches, not gone into too much detail in just this particular case, but I've got a fair number of branches there, about probably 10 to 15 in total, probably closer to 10 actually. Okay, so that's basically the curve modeling done. We can get rid of the background picture now because we're finished with that. What we're going to do now is get on with creating where the twigs are going to go. So we're going to add a cube, and we're going to change this, we're going to subsurf it, and I want you to set the level of it to 3. Now what I've found from personal experience and just through testing is that the higher you set the subsurf level to is the more twigs you get. So I found 2 is not really enough, and 3 works pretty well. So that's what I'm going to be using now. Okay, so now what we're going to be doing is just positioning this cube and just duplicating them for each of these branches here. So just go along, just duplicate it, and just toss one on. And when you've finished, you should just have like looks like something with like toothpicks and cotton buds all over it. And that's just going to be where the twigs are going to be generated, just along each of these points here. So as I said, you want to go to just spend a bit of time just experimenting where you're going to put these twigs. I find that the more if you have a lot of smaller bubbles, it works better than if you just have like a couple of rather big ones and just call it a day. Yeah, because it creating just a couple gives too much control to the computer, and the twigs can just go haywire and just not look very realistic at all. Okay, and that's basically it. Oh, one more there, like so. So like I said, yeah, it looks like a bunch of toothpicks with cotton buds all over it, and that's how it should look. What we're going to do now is we're going to select all of these balls, and we're going to hit Control J, and they're all joined now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate all those and then move the duplicate to the last layer. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to hit Apply on the subsurf stacker, and there's no going back on that. This is a very important step. Don't forget to hit Apply or you'll get some strange looking twigs, trust me. I've been baffled for hours trying to figure out why they were looking weird, and that was the problem. Okay, so one last thing I like to do just to give it that extra realistic touch. If you leave it the way it is, it can sort of, the twigs can sort of form the shape of these balls here. So what I just do is I just take out this this sculpting brush and I just give them a bit of a random shape, and that makes it, instead of just balls, you get these pebble shapes, and that just, it fools the viewer really into just thinking they're not balls, they're strange shapes. So that's what we're trying to do here. Let's make them as imperfect as possible. Just like so. Going to change it to sub now. Just create little indents in them. Just like so. Okay. And that should be enough, I think. Okay, now onto the fun part. Going to split the window in two. Change the split to a scripts window. Then hit scripts, go up to wizards, and hit tree from curves. Anyone with Blender 2.49 should have this script. If you don't, you might want to update your Python, Python version. Okay, so to use the script, you need to have the curve selected. First things first, though, I'm just going to save a copy of, just save the file. This script is, although it's usually pretty good, sometimes I've found it can crash the computer, so I just want to make sure you save often, especially if you have your subsurf up fairly big, because it can really weigh down on the computer. Okay, so with the curve selected, go ahead and hit generate from selection. Now what's that has done is it's created a mesh over, so we've got two objects here, as you can see. So go ahead and move, I've moved the wrong one now. Okay. Alright, so we've got this, it's created a mesh for us, and that's a fairly low poly, it's a low poly mesh. It's really well designed script in that you can now very easily just select points you don't want, move them about, and it's all subsurfed for you, and it creates a pretty realistic result. Okay, so now we're going to move on to putting the twigs in. This is the best part. Okay, so we need to change the name of these pebble shapes we've created here, and just change it to twigs. Okay, then go to the script window, hit fill twigs. In the object bound, going to type in twigs. And in the generations, I'm going to turn that up to 6, and that's just the number of splits and forks that the twigs can sort of go into. I found 6 works well, but you might want to experiment a bit. And change the randomized scale all the way up to maximum, which is 1. And what that means is that it will randomize the distance the twigs go from the edge of the bounding boxes. So if you have that really low, the twigs are all going to go to the edges, and it's going to be fairly obvious that it's been generated. So if you set it to that, it's a lot more random, and it's more realistic in that sense. Okay, so also another thing with the script, you can have the mesh selected as well and still hit generate from selection. So that's what we're going to do now. I'm going to save it first and go ahead and hit generate from selection. And there you go, you've got a fairly nice looking tree. It's not entirely perfect. If you're doing some close-up shots, you might want to fix up some of this spastic looking twigs that are sort of just going haywire. But generally, I find that it works fairly well. Just like I said, experiment with where you're putting these objects here. Sometimes if you just sort of move one a little bit and stop them from overlapping, you can prevent some problems. But it looks fairly good from just from this point of view. So I'm just going to leave it like that for the moment. Okay, so it's basically if this was a winter scene, that'd be fairly good to go. Going to move on to the generating the materials now. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is split the window in 2. So we're going to have 3 windows now, and change it to UV image editor. Now what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to put a bark texture here. Now this is a texture that I've pulled off the internet. I think I just Google image search and just found this. I'll put a link up for this on the tutorial as well if you just want to use this. The great thing about this texture is it's tileable, which you really need for this, so make sure you do that. Okay, so I'm going to hit Generate UVs in the script window and change the scale U to 2. And we're going to hit Use Active. And once that's done, now it says Bark01, so that's the name of the texture. So it's just grabbed the active texture there. So we can close that off now because we don't need it. And now we're going to hit Generate Material. And what that will do is it just where these branches join in closely here, if you didn't have Generate Material, what it would have is just these hard seams where the material is just sort of clashed, and it looks pretty fake, obviously. So with that blend there, it just sort of creates like a gradient effect over it, and you can't see a joint, and it works really well. So we're just going to leave that there. Okay, now with the tree selected again, make sure you save it first, and then hit Generate from Selection. Okay, now if we go to the material settings now, you should see it's created a nice tree texture there for us. One thing we want to do first though, turn the speck off, because trees aren't shiny, so you definitely want to turn that completely off. Now I'm just going to add a texture below the 3 that it's created there for us. What I've done is I've got the texture, the bark texture, and just using the NVIDIA normal map creator, I've just turned it into a normal map, and I'll put a link up for that on my tutorial site as well. So what we're going to do is change the map endpoint from Orca to UV, and from color, going to change it to NOR, and turn NOR all the way up to 25, and that way you'll be able to see it. And also hit normal map in the image settings so that we get the normal map effect. Okay, so if we rendered this now, again, save it before you do this, and you should get a render that looks something like that. So you can see that you can got some decent texture there. It's not too small that you can't see it, and it's not too big that it's unrealistic. So that's looking fairly good. What we're going to move on to now is the leaves. So go into the top view and add a plane. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just going to go to edit mode and then just move this plane up so that the center point there is just at the edge, because that's where the stem is going to be sprouting from when it sticks to these branches here. So you want to make sure you do that. Add a material. I'm going to go back to the image editor now. Select it. Go UV unwrap, UV unwrap, and now I'm just going to pull this particular leaf texture, which I found off cgtextures.com, and I'll put a link up for that on the site as well. Okay, so it's just a basic leaf. Just gonna, oops. Okay, there we go. So it's a basic leaf, and that's just going to be UV mapped onto that plane there. Now, in order to make this really low poly, we don't want to have to bother cutting out manually with the modeling it by hand. So what I've done is I've taken that same texture and I've just taken it into Photoshop, and I've gone around it with the pen tool, and that is going to allow us to use it as an alpha mask. So just to show you what I've done now, I've put that image there into our texture window here. Change the map input to UV for both of these textures. So the color is on the top and the black and white version is on the bottom there. And just with the black and white one, I'm going to change it to turn a color off, select alpha, hit no RGB, and hit alpha twice so that it's yellow. Now if we turn the alpha off now, and hitting Z transparency there, you can see that now the tree is, this leaf here in the texture preview is it's completely cut around. So now when that plane is rendered, it's just going to look like a really high detailed leaf, which is great for what we want. Okay, so with our tree selected now, we're going to hit the Generate Leaves tab in the script window. So it's going to ask for the object, obviously. So we're going to name this plane to leaf. And so up here, type in leaf, as you might have guessed. And we're going to set the size to 0.1. Now the size there, that's actually the size of the markers. I'm not sure why it's done this by default, but 0.5, it'll create these massive markers which are planes, which sort of it's just to show you where it's going to be sticking the leaves, but they're so huge you can't actually even see where the leaves are being put. So if you set it to 0.1, it's going to turn the size of those markers right down, so you're not going to be able to see it as much. Okay, so if we go ahead and save our file now, because we're going to be generating the leaves. So if we go and hit generate from selection, you can see it's put the leaves all over the tree. The problem with it is that it's put them randomly, and that it's just a porcupine fur effect almost, which you might think would probably work from a distance, but it just looks odd and it's not very realistic, because leaves naturally are flat and that they're trying to absorb as much sunlight as possible. So that the reason why it's all sticking out porcupine is because this plane here is it's got the wrong coordinates. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix that. So we have to enter edit mode, so hit tab, and then we're going to rotate it counterclockwise, holding down the control key, 90 degrees. So we click that and release. Now, as you can see, the planes are all now pointing in one direction, which is good, but they're all pointing sideways. So now, if we're in object mode now, if we rotate it, we're going to rotate it back now. So back sideways like that. And now, if we go to the top view, you can see that they're all pointing flat, which is where the sun is, so it's now realistic for what we want. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and save this. Now if we render this right now, we get a pretty realistic result. Okay, now the final thing that we're going to be doing is we're just going to be adding a displacement map. This is a fairly fiddly job, and it depends on the type of tree that you're using, but this is just something I've done for mine. Okay, so we're going to add a texture to our tree. I'm going to make it clouds. I'm going to set the noise size to 0.3 and the noise depth to 0. Okay, now we're going to go to the texture view, and we're going to turn off that texture because we don't want to see it. It's just so we can edit it in the modifier stack. So I've added a displacement to the modifier stacker here. Now it's under texture. We're going to type the name of the texture, which I did not remember. Okay, so we need to change that to cloud or whatever you want, and then in texture type in cloud. Now the tree is going to go nuts, as you can see. That's because the strength is too high, so we're going to set that to a 0.05. Now again, it's a fairly fiddly in that you just need to experiment with what strengths work well. You know, the size of the noise of the cloud. For my remembering the past pick, I actually used 2 texture channels. So there was 2 displacements here. One of the clouds was big, one of them was small. But for this, we're just going to leave it as that. If we go and render this now, as you can see, we've got a slight bumpy texture to our branch. It's not very obvious because I think I've made the strength not enough. But something you will notice is that on these twigs here, it makes them fat and just sort of weird, like little Cheerios sausage shapes. And that's because it's so thin that it's applying the displacement on it, and it looks weird. So what we want to do is we want to make the displacement texture only affect the trunk but not the twigs and the smaller sizes. So to get around that, we're going to be just going to save it there. We're going to be using the weight painting. This is fairly quick. First thing we need to do though, to paint, the computer will go incredibly slow, at least on mine, if you try and paint with subsurf on. So just uncheck the middle box there in the subsurf settings, and that will just turn it off for the editing mode. Now what we're going to do is we're going to be painting areas that we want the displacement to affect. So blue is not affected at all, but if we the red areas, which we're going to be painting, is completely affected. So set the weight to 1 and the opacity to half. And I'm just going to turn the size up to about 40. And I'm going to hit spray as well, so you can just hold down the button and you're good to just spray all over it. Okay, so let's just get down with that. So as you can see, as you move this weight painting over it and you hold it down, it turns red. I'm going to turn the size of it up a bit just to speed things along. So yeah, like I said, you want to make the thicker parts red, and then just as it moves along the these parts here, sort of go for a greeny blue color. That would work okay, I think. So you might want to just turn off the leaves if they're getting in your way and you want to see around them. For this is just fine for the moment. So just these thinner parts here, I'm just going to leave them as a green shape, making sure that the trunk and the thicker parts are completely red or orange. And that'll make sure that the texture affects the trunk size a fair bit. Okay, so just moving up. Okay, so that should be fairly straightforward. You could spend a fair bit of time, I suppose, zooming in and just getting those bits in between there, and avoiding all the twigs. I'm just going to leave it like that for the moment. It's not a huge problem. Okay, so what that has done when we entered the weight painting mode, it's created a vertex group for us, and it's called it group. So if we go to the displacement, we change this. First thing I'm going to do is just change the strength actually to 0.1, just so we can see it some more. So yeah, just watch the twigs as we enter this in. Type in group. All the twigs are now completely normal, but the trunk is all messed up, which is what we want. So the displacement map is only now affecting the trunk and not the twigs. Okay, so if we render this now, let's have a look at the result. So there you have it. You've got this these little bumpy areas over here where these where the branches come out, and along the trunk there. You can spend a bit more time just experimenting with different textures, making it more bumpy, less bumpy. And yeah, the twigs are now perfectly fine, and the tree stones look fairly realistic. So yeah, that basically concludes the tutorial. I'm just going to be making a few slight changes here. I've just changed the size of the leaves down 60%. And one other thing, and it's just a personal preference of mine, is I don't like the color of those yellow leaves. So just using the new texture nodes. If you're not sure how to use texture nodes, by the way, be sure to check out my tutorial on how to use the new texture node feature. But it's just changing it from yellow to red just quickly without using any image editor. And I've just made it red. I'm going to change the saturation a little bit as well. So I want to go for a more autumny color as opposed to an ugly yellowy leaf color. So I've just altered the hue there for the leaves, and now when I hit render, I get a much nicer autumny looking result. Okay, so that concludes the tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've taken something from it. I'd like to see whatever tree you've come up with from this tutorial. So be sure to post your result in the comments section. Just upload it to Image Shack and just throw a link up there. Just yeah, allow other people to have a look at it, and yeah, it's very interesting. So yeah, if you can yeah, let me know how it goes, and hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Be sure to check out Blender Guru for other tutorials like it. Thank you for watching.